session is a keynote address by Dr. Sanjay Zhodpe, National President IAPSM. To chair the session, may I invite Dr. C.S. Pandav, Member National Council of India, Nutritional Challenges, Poshan Abhiyan, former HOD, Center for Community Medicine, AIMS, New Delhi, and Dr. Subhash Salunki, Senior Advisor, Public Health Foundation of India, ex-Director General, Health Services, Government of Maharashtra. I hereby request the chairpersons to please proceed with the session.
Namaskar, very good morning. It's really a historic moment for me that I'm sharing the dais with two of my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Subhash Salunke and Dr. Sanjay Zhodpe. I bring to you all greetings from the city of New Delhi. New Delhi, as you know, is the capital city of India, but these days is also the capital city of anybody? Pollution. What is the vernacular translation of oxygen? Oxygen को हिंदी में या मराठी में क्या बोलते हैं? प्राणवायु. So in Delhi we are privileged to breathe मृत्यु वायु. We don't get प्राणवायु there. The second characteristic feature of Delhi is, you all know, the perception of truth is determined by 5 senses that we have: sight, taste, smell, hear, and touch. The 6th sense is a philosophical appreciation of the 5 senses. If you have a guru and you meditate, you learn 6 senses. But in Delhiites, those who stay in Delhi, environmentally they get exposed to another sense, where there is a pandemic of sense, and that is nonsense. So with these opening remarks, I just want to share with you that I think the Maharashtra state is the only state in the country which has a joint conference of IAPSM and IPHA. And I had the privilege of being the president of the IAPSM, national president of IAPSM in 2007 and IPHA in 2010 and 13. So, ladies and gentlemen, first let's appreciate the Maharashtra team. This is their 21st conference. It's incredible. Now, I was very weak in physiology, pathology, and gynecology. So these days I reverted to numerology. Number 21 is all about unity. Unity, which you are very well reflected in having a joint conference. It's all about fulfillment. The scientific session will fill your plate to the full. And it's all about happiness, that I can see everybody experiencing it. So number 21 is very appropriate for this conference. When you see number 21, you are on the verge of manifesting your desires on a large scale. So scaling up is going to happen here from now. I think you're going to be the leaders in making this national movement. Since you're a national president, we should try to take this movement of joint conferences all over the country. Now, coming to the introduction of the speaker, there is a formal introduction, but since I am Pandav, I'll give you the Mahabharata introduction of Sanjay. Sanjay is, of course, the first television anchor in the world historically. What he saw on the field, he conveyed to the king, who was blind. So I am very careful with Sanjay, and I have a deep respect on that context of historical thing. But Sanjay, I see as a combination. I'm a very secular person before I say anything further. A unique combination of Ekalavya and Karna. Ekalavya and Karna. Ramayana teaches you what to do in life. Mahabharata teaches you what not to do in life, which is equally important. And this is the environment and background he has come up in terms of a combination of Ekalavya and Karna. And he has attained this height because of those tireless efforts. Sanjay is also a visionary. He's a statesman. He's not a politician. Now you'll ask me, what is the difference between the two? These days, the politician always thinks of next elections, and more recently of the next by-elections. statesman always thinks of next generation. And very rightly, it is reflected in the theme of the conference that he had discussed with me 2 years back, that he wants to have a caucus of young leaders, national conclave, public health leadership for the 21st century. So that's what a statesman thinks of. That's how I understand Sanjay in today's environment. With these words, the topic that he has taken is also equally challenging. It's futuristic. So, Sanjay, we are very eager to listen to you, what you have to say. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give a big hand to Dr. Sanjay Zhodpe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this generous introduction. Professor C.S. Pandav and Dr. Subhash Sarunke, co-chairs for this scientific session. Distinguished delegates for the conference, luminaries from the field of medicine, community medicine and public health, faculty members and postgraduate students from medical colleges. We have colleagues from health services, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. This is an extraordinary privilege and a huge honor to deliver this particular keynote address when you have Professor C.S. Pandav and Dr. Subhash Sarunke co-chairing this particular session, because they have been my mentors for more than 25 years. Knowing them they know me very personally and professionally, and have a significant contribution in my professional journey. And therefore I say that this is an extraordinary privilege and huge honor. At the outset, I also express my gratitude to the organizers, and particularly Abhay, Zahir and Sonali, for inviting me and requesting me to talk to you and deliver this particular keynote address as a part of the state conference and leadership conclave. When they called me and requested for a keynote address, I contemplated on what should I speak. And then I thought that it would be more relevant as a national president of IAPSM that I share with you some thoughts related to our own discipline in a futuristic way. And therefore I articulated the title for this talk as Contextualizing and Catapulting Community Medicine as a Discipline in the 21st Century. I'm not going to pulverize you with the PowerPoint presentation, because I believe that I should speak to you as directly as possible on the issue which I believe needs greater public discourse in the fraternity of community medicine to position ourselves in the 21st century. And in that context, I thought that it would be useful that I use only a couple of slides to talk to you, but share my own thoughts that how do we can position ourselves and contribute to the public health as a discipline. And therefore, I will have a Mann Ki Baat with you. And before I talk about our discipline, it is important for all of us to understand where does India stands today on the health front. Very quickly and briefly to recapitulate that from the public health perspective, where are we? If you look at the broad-based indices, like Human Development Index, we are ranked 133 out of 188 countries. If you take a very specific index, that is Sustainable Development Goals 3, SDG 3 index, we are 128 out of 188 countries. If you talk about Human Happiness Index, then we are 128 out of 156 countries. So from that parlance then, we are neither a healthy nor a happy country. Our life expectancy is second lowest in Asia. Our infant mortality rate is 3 times high as compared to Thailand or Sri Lanka. Our immunization rates still struggle between 64-65%, the full immunization coverage, which is even lower than some sub-Saharan African countries. Even in Sri Lanka, at the height of the civil conflict, they had their immunization rates more than 90%. A third of our children are underweight and undernourished. And from a demographic perspective, 65% of our population is less than 35 years of age. 50% of our population is less than 25 years of age. We are an amazingly young nation. Average age of Indian population is 29 years. Japan 46, Europe 46, China close to 40, United States just above 40, and we have average age of 29 years. If we really wanted to take the advantage of demographic dividend that we have, we'll have to really think about the situation like when we talk about a third of our children are malnourished and underweight. Communicable diseases, an example of tuberculosis, 27% of disease burden of tuberculosis that we have in India. Non-communicable diseases, 70 million people in this country suffer from diabetes. More than 1 million deaths are every year attributed to the tobacco consumption. 1.6 million premature deaths every year are attributed to the air pollution, what Professor Pandu just mentioned about, a very threatening problem that we face as a country. 49 million disability adjusted life years are attributed to the air pollution. In fact, that translates to 9% of our national disease burden is because of the air pollution. If you look at inequities also, so rampant. A girl child born in Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh is 5 times more likely to die in the first year of life as compared to a girl child born in Kerala or Tamil Nadu. So in the lottery of life in India, it matters where you are born. If a girl child born in Tamil Nadu or Kerala, the survival is 5 times more as compared to somebody as a girl child born in northern part of the country. If you look at the immunization rates from the economic quintiles perspective, you would find that the difference is more than 45%. The highest quintile, the 87-88% of immunization coverage. And the lowest quintile, it is just above 40%. Same is the story of infrastructure. With the 20% of the total global disease burden in India, I mentioned about tuberculosis as 27%, and you talk about maternal deaths, we account for 15%, but overall total disease burden is close to 20%. We have 6% of the global hospital beds. We have 8% of the global doctors that are available in India. So there also we do struggle. Some of the information that I presented to you is a little dismal and worrying. But I firmly believe that our national bird is peacock and not the ostrich. And therefore it is important for us to look around so that we can see what are those problems and fix them. Unless we take the cognizance of the problems that we are confronted with, we would not be able to find the solutions to the problem. And that from that perspective, it is important to realize what are our public health challenges and where do we stand from the public health perspective as a nation. Professor Amartya Sen tells us that with uneducated and unhealthy population, we cannot be a superpower. To dream to be a superpower is really very good, but we also need to see that how do we translate that vision into strengthening our own system so that we can take. And I personally feel community medicine discipline can play an important role as an instrument in advancing public health in this country, particularly in this 21st century. If we really wanted to address these challenges, we will have to position ourselves. We will have to respond to these challenges, and therefore I thought and articulated the title to deliberate on contextualizing and catapulting community medicine discipline in 21st century. We will have to invest our time and talent in strengthening our discipline and departments in order to ensure that we produce quality programs and products. So the investment of our time and talent in strengthening our discipline and departments to ensure that we have a quality programs and we produce quality product, and those products have our undergraduate and postgraduate students. But how do we do that? Because we all understand that this is necessary. But the question is, it is not important to understand what are challenges, but how do we respond to these challenges, and how do we position as a community medicine discipline to really advance this particular agenda of public health so that we also contribute to the humanity, society, and nation building. At times I'm confronted, and we have seen debates and discussion and deliberations related to our discipline. Not getting into that too much details, but it's important to mention a few of them, like for example, an argument and discussion related to whether our discipline is classified as a clinical discipline or not classified as a clinical discipline by a professional council. At times you feel that, does it really matter? Of course it matters. In documentation purposes and from professional council point of view, we need position ourselves. But it is important to us that, it is important for us to say that, are we really then performing clinical duties? If we are really engaged into who would actually withdraw that privilege of claiming ourselves to be a clinicians or contributing even to the clinical discipline. There was a recent discussion of someone saying that whether we really need community medicine as a part of our MBBS program. We spent a lot of time and energy. Of course, we appropriately responded to that as an association also. But really, does it matter that what other people are saying about us? And instead of reacting, I think we should respond to these challenges. We should position our response instead of reacting to what others have said. We all understand the relevance, importance, and context of our own discipline, not only in advancing public health, but contributing to the humanity also. Sometimes we get into the semantics of social and preventive medicine and then community medicine and public health. I've seen these all as Venn diagrams, and there's a lot of overlap, around 70 to 80%, and there might be some semantic differences. But how does it matter actually, as long as our contribution is concerned? Sometimes there is also an argument and some feeling that at times we are not invited, or we are not respected, or we are not respected, or we are not rewarded. I think respect has to be commanded. We know several people whose contribution is extraordinary, and they will always be called for. Now, at this age also, I don't want to reveal the age of Dr. Subhash Sarunke, but even at this age also, 3 days back, he received a phone call from the office of the Secretary, Union Secretary, Health, Government of India, requesting his advice and guidance on dealing with this situation. Why is being called? Professor Pandav has been requested to be a part of the very high-level committee constituted by the Prime Minister of India related to the Poshan Abhiyan that we have. Why he is invited? If we really contribute significantly, I think we will command the respect of everybody and we will be there everywhere. And therefore, getting into these issues, I think we need to see how do we see our discipline as an instrument in promoting and advancing public health. We have 532 medical colleges in India. We have an intake capacity of close to 78,000 undergraduate students. We all teach them community medicine. Huge opportunity for all of us to influence and impact this cohort of 78,000 graduates being admitted every year and make them understand the relevance, importance, and contribution of our own discipline. Nobody can actually withdraw from that responsibility and accountability that we have. We have 260 medical colleges in India where we have MD community medicine program, and seats are close to now more than 1,000 or so. So there is a huge opportunity for us several of us working in the departments of community medicine to contribute in capacity building at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. But they are the future of this country. They are the future leaders of this country. They would be the champions of the country. But then how do we do that? Let me ponder on some issues in the context of teaching and training. Few years back, precisely maybe around a decade back in 2010, Lancet Commission was constituted on reforms in health professional education, chaired by then Dean from the Harvard School of Public Health, Julio Frenk, and the Executive Director of China Medical Board, Lincoln Chen. Lancet Commission deliberated on 3 professions: medicine, nursing, and public health. And they provided certain recommendations in the context of how do we position these professions in the 21st century from the education perspective. This commission dealt on 3 important educational reforms. They talked about 100 years back, at the beginning of the previous century, the major reform that had happened was related to science-based curriculum. Around mid-century, 1960s and 1965 and somewhere that period, the focus shifted to the problem-based learning. And what they today contemplated for the beginning of the 21st century, which is the need of the hour, is a systems-based approach. There has to be an interface between education and health system. The focus that they have brought to the deliberations in the context of health professional education relates to the transformative learning, and for which they recommended reforms at 2 levels: institutional reforms and instructional reforms. When they talked about institutional reforms, it is about the governance and leadership and infrastructure and faculty and other matters. And when they talk about instructional reforms, they deliberated on the curriculum and competencies and career pathways. They also emphasized on reforms in the context of both design and delivery of our academic programs, and for which they have recommended the transformative learning. There are 3 levels of learning in education system: informative, formative, and transformative learning. Informative learning means transfer of information and, rather I would say, knowledge and skills, which would create experts. Formative learning means, in addition to that, socializing values, ethics, and morals, which would produce professionals. But we need to go further forward, a step ahead of that, and bring a transformative learning where we talk about leadership attributes, where we then create change agents in the society. That's the transformative learning all about. Because we need to contemplate and deliberate that we are producing our graduates, we are preparing them for the jobs which even do not exist today. I'm not sure how many of you have read a report prepared by a global McKinsey a couple of years back, I think in 2018, on the change in labor market dynamics and professions and occupations that is going to happen in next 20 to 30 years globally. They also deliberated on the health sector. Several of our graduates that we produce today would be working in the professions which even don't exist today. So we have to prepare our graduates in such a way, or to train them in such a way and prepare them for the jobs which do not exist today. Because we need to prepare them for their future and not our past. And from that perspective, we need to deliberate that how do we bring reforms as a part of our health professional education, which also includes public health. It will not be an exaggeration to talk about this 30-70 paradox in the context of our education. If the 30% of way or the 30% of our curriculum is redundant, the 70% that the way we teach is redundant. So if you look at from the content and curriculum point of view, and if you see that the globalization that we need to make the changes both in terms of our curriculum and competencies, and from that perspective it is 30% redundant, but then the way we actually teach is 70% redundant. There is going to be a huge impact of technology intrusion in our teaching and learning processes. It's not like 20 years back or 30 years back, the way we learned, some of the senior people here sitting here, the way we all learned. We don't have to go to the library and access to the knowledge. No, access to the knowledge is at the tip of the fingers. The huge transformation has happened. Social media and other things have happening. We'll have to configure ourselves and see the e-learning, virtual learning. We don't know really if physical infrastructure would really exist after 30 years, or will there be a lot of virtual learning which would be, dominate the scene after 20, 30 years. From that perspective, we'll have to figure out ourselves that how do we position ourselves. If we talk about 21st century skills, I would say, from public health perspective, it is very simple to explain. And somebody asked that what a public health graduate should do, or what a public health graduate should be able to do. I only say that public health graduate should be able to do only 4 things. And all other activities can be pushed into these 4 buckets that you talk about. He or she should be able to describe the problem. He or she should be able to design the solutions to solve those problems. He or she should be then able to implement those solutions. And then finally, he or she should be able to see whether it has worked or not. That is what exactly the public health is all about, not beyond that. But that all about technical competencies. Yes, we all agree that technical competencies are very critical. If I am an epidemiologist, I must have been possession of those technical skills and competencies. But the way we are positioned in 21st century, I would say, there are some additional skills and competencies which are extremely critical and important and even relevant today. For example, communications, both written and oral communication skills. Our graduates, coherently able to articulate thoughts and present it on a piece of paper is equally important. They should be able to articulate their thoughts and communicate more effectively and efficiently. When you talk to the senior policymakers, you have 2 minutes or 5 minutes to talk about. In those 2 minutes, how do you articulate your thoughts and impress upon is a skill that needs to be acquired. It's not only the 45 minutes or 1 hour session and lecture is available at our disposal and the liberty of having that much amount of time. We all understand in a policymaker's perspective that when you have an elevator, you enter into an elevator with a policymaker and go to the 7th floor, and those 15 to 20 seconds are with you to communicate more efficiently and effectively to tell and impress him or her on some of the issues. Critical thinking. Extremely critical, important. Analytical ability. Take an example of big data analytics, which probably was not that extensively engaged into last 10, 20 years back. But those analytical skills are important. Collaboration, leadership, creativity, problem solving. They would be confronted with the problems on day-to-day basis, and problems will change. Self-reflection, their capacity to take decisions, innovations, all those skills are also important. And therefore, it is important that if we are spending our 75% or 80% of our time on imparting those technical skills, we also should reserve our 20% of our time to deliberate on those soft skills. And the list is huge. Obviously, I illustratively picked up a few of them so that they are more in a better position to deal with the public health challenges of 21st century. And we must also realize that Lewis Carroll in Alice in Wonderland tells us that if you don't know where you are going, any road will you get there from the competencies perspective. Moving from our training and teaching to research. Science is sterile if it lacks the social relevance. And policies would crumble on clay feet if they are not firmly placed on a pedestal of valid science. I repeat, science is sterile if it lacks the social relevance and purpose. Policies would crumble on clay feet if they are not firmly placed on a pedestal of valid science. That's the reality that we need to understand. Because research is merely a tool. What ultimately benefits to the society is the knowledge. And when you talk about knowledge, we see that research is a tool to generate the knowledge. It has two components, knowledge generation and knowledge translation. Knowledge generation is a research business that gives you the thrills of discovery. You're very happy that you did a research and good piece of research and published. But that happiness should not end there. Research translation would give you the sense of purpose being fulfilled. And therefore, moving from research generation to the research knowledge generation to the knowledge translation is really very important. We at times debate on indicators like, for example, the grants that we have and publications and impact factor and so many other indicators that we have. But what finally matters from the humanity and from the society point of view is that whatever piece of research that we have carried out has really contributed to the programs and policies and really benefited to the populations is more important. And therefore, this debate of actually publications versus research translation, not to be taken further forward saying that research translation has really relevance and importance. And from that perspective, it is also important for all of us regarding our engagement with the policymakers. And I wanted to proudly say, Dr. Kadri is also here, who is our Secretary General of Indian Association of Preventive and Social Medicine, that we have been able to take IAPSM agenda to the policymakers. We have enhanced our scope of engaging with the policymakers, both in the ministry and in the NITI Aayog. Not only that engaging with the health ministry is important, but engaging with other ministries is also important, because we all believe that health lies beyond health sector. And that is relevant for all of us. But we also need to see that our policies and programs are connected to the ground realities. I will narrate a brief story of a centipede and owl. The story is told to me by Professor C.S. Pandav 28 years back. The story is like this. There was a couple centipede couple living in a jungle, Mr. and Mrs. Centipede, growing older, and you know that centipede had the certain number of pairs of legs, and based on genetic configuration, they are classified in different classes. So I'm telling you a story of a centipede who had 100 pairs of legs. Mr. Centipede and Mrs. Centipede living very happily, growing older. As any henpecked husband would do, Mr. Centipede tells his wife, Mrs. Centipede, that we are growing older, and nowadays I'm now getting pain in my legs, and it is difficult to crawl, and it is unbearable now. What do I do? He sought an advice of his wife. And Mrs. Centipede tells Mr. Centipede that, why don't you go to a wise person in a jungle and seek his advice on this problem? Mr. Centipede happily looked at who would be the wise person in jungle and went to the owl, the wise person in the jungle. He goes there and tells his story, saying that, I have pain in my legs, and it's unbearable, and what do I do? And I come to you because you are a wise gentleman, so please advise me. The owl tells him that, yes, I have a solution and I can tell you, but that is not 100% solution. But now you have 100 pairs of legs, and if that translates to 100 units of pen, then I will reduce it to 1 unit of pen. I can reduce your pen by 100th. I can make it 100. So Mr. Centipede becomes so happy that, 100 pen means, just bearable, so that's fine. He said that, please tell me, what do I do? The owl tells, the wise person to a centipede, why don't you become a man? Because man has only 1 pair of legs. You have 100 pairs of legs, so you become a man. He happily comes back and tells his wife that, I have a solution and my pain can be reduced to 100 times less. She says, that's great, what do you want to do? He says that, I need to become a man, because man has only 1 pair of legs. Then wife asks him that, but then how do you become a man? I forgot to ask him that, how do I become a man? Went back to owl and asked him, checks with him, how do I become a man? Being wise gentleman, he tells him, I am a wise man. I take policy decisions. It is up to you to implement. And that's how the story ends here. There has to be connectivity between the ground realities and our policies and programs. That take me to how do we as community medicine contributes to the policies and programs. It's an iterative loop of research to policy and policy to program. Our research must contribute to the programs, and then programs to the policy, and then the programs emerge out of the policies. I would give a couple of examples. What has happened is that IV iron sucrose was very rampantly used, even as a part of the National Health Mission also, for treatment of moderate to severe anemia in pregnant women. The government of India, when they were formulating the guidelines, this is a few years back, they realized that this particular drug in IV form is not approved by the DCGI. And they said that, but it is being used. The obstetricians, you check with the obstetricians and gynecologists, they have been rampantly prescribing. Even the government hospitals through NHM also purchased this drug, and it is being rampantly used. Then they proposed that what do we do, and then we conducted a clinical trial. Randomized controlled clinical trial was conducted. Few centers were involved, few medical colleges were involved, and then the results were made available, and now as a part of the anemia treatment become a part of the program. The another example that I would say and would like to mention about is, we work in Haryana, and the sex selection drugs, so they call, are very commonly used. They contain some phytogens and other things. And during a very informal conversations, the MD NHM then Dr. Gupta said to us that there are more cases of congenital malformation and stillbirths being reported in Haryana. Can you help us to investigate? We conducted a case control studies, 2 different case control studies. One is for congenital malformations and other is for stillbirths in the different hospitals district hospitals in Haryana. And we found that the consumption of this particular drug has really contributed to the congenital malformations and sex selection drugs. Then they have taken up this particular issue and has become a part of the Beti Bachao program and become a part of the program and policy. And even the police department came into a picture of catching all these people and who are responsible for propagating those kind of activities. As a part of the RNTCP program, when there was a planning of shifting to a daily regime, the Deputy Director General had requested us that we wanted to change the policy and strategy to move on daily regime. Can you help us in identifying the bottlenecks, facilitators, barriers, if we really take up and scale up at the national level? This has happened in last few exemplars, but I know that there could be many examples where community medicine colleagues can contribute to. Our current engagement with the RNTCP, Dr. Bhavesh is also here, is huge. We as an IAPSM are planning to sign a formal memorandum of understanding. The draft MOU has also been agreed and approved in next few weeks or so, involving our IAPSM members through the medical colleges contributing to RNTCP program formally, but otherwise also for last around, I think, 3 to 5 years, we have been contributing quite significantly from the policy perspective. As a part of the National Health Policy 2017, rolling out some of the important components like public health cadre is there, or any other opportunities are there, we can really play an important role. We need to position ourselves how, as departments of community medicine, can play an important role as part of the policy. Programs and practice. Sometimes we feel that why some disciplines and professions are recognized, like medicine as a profession, law as a profession, management as a profession, they are recognized. We need to see that public health is recognized as a profession. If we wanted public health is to be recognized as a profession, then the word practice is more important. The practice of law, practice of management, practice of medicine, so the practice of public health. If we continue to only teach and preach, it's not going to work. We will have to really demonstrate that the practice of public health is in place and we are engaged as public health practitioners so that we can transform this as a public health profession. We can provide a technical support. In the districts now, we have 532 medical colleges in the country. The Government of India's commitment is to add this number to by 75 more medical colleges. So I think next couple of years we'll have more than 600 medical schools. Practically in each district we'll have a medical college in India. And there provides the opportunity, like for example, involving in monitoring and evaluation, comprehensive primary health care. Can we not, as Department of Community Medicine, adopt few health and wellness centers and come out with ideal, or I would say that the best health and wellness centers, documenting those best practices and helping us to share and learn from each other. Our involvement in national programs, I talked about RNTCP, but there are other programs also, immunization we are involved into. We are closely working with Niti Aayog on MIYCN. We have constituted a task force and through which we are conducting some studies also which are supported by some external agencies. There provides the opportunity for all of us to contribute to the programs. Now here is a threatening pandemic. And we had today Dr. Tande talking to us about the threatening pandemic that we are confronting. And Dr. Subhash Sarunke, who is currently engaged in this very important initiative at the national level, very closely working with the Government of India, tells us that they need people to contribute. For example, the cluster containment. There are many other activities where we can, as an association and departments and individuals, volunteer and contribute to. Last week I was in Delhi and some of you were there. Professor Panda was also there. And Honorable Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan was inaugurating the Indian Public Health IPHA conference. And he repeatedly mentioned during his inaugural address about two associations, IAPSM and IPHA, how they can contribute and how he was talking about how the government can leverage from these two associations and help the government of India in several initiatives that they are contemplating. It is directly coming from the government of India. It's directly request coming from the government of India that we actively contribute to beyond medical school. He really emphasized that we all understand our primary responsibility is teaching and training and conducting research and practice in medical colleges and departments of community medicine. But he says that beyond that also probably if you can help us and contribute will really be appreciated. Coming from the government of India is important. That brings us to the role of an advocacy that we can play. The public health cadre is articulated in our national health policy, which was released in 2017. And the most important part of public health cadre is, it is not necessary to debate what is to be done, but how it is to be done. And therefore, engagement with the states is important. I will again quote Dr. Sarunke, who is involved in this important initiative that engaged with several states, because they need technical assistance and support in really articulating this as a policy. And that will benefit our own graduates. We will be able to create positions which will really benefit to our own students. That will enhance the public health practice. That will strengthen our infrastructure. That will strengthen our system. We need people trained in public health in our system. On one hand, we say that we don't have people trained in public health working in the health systems and in positions where they can actually deal with the programs and policies. But on the other hand, there is an inertia, and probably we need to actually focus on this. We need that passion and enthusiasm to push public health cadre. Sir Michael Marmot tells us that the conditions in which we born, grow, work, live, and age all have influence on our health. And therefore, it is important to talk about multi-sectoral engagements. It is not only the health ministry. Health ministry has very limited role to play related to our health. There are several other ministries. If we talk about road traffic accidents, we have more than around 5 lakh road traffic accidents every year. Engaging with the ministry which deals with the road and highways is important. Professor Pandu mentioned about air pollution. What can the health ministry would do? Of course, we will have to engage with other ministries. Our agricultural policies, nutrition and food policies have such an influence on our whole health. Unless we engage with those ministries, how do we actually advance public health? Even the finance ministry, the taxation policies of the government of India, like tobacco taxation or alcohol taxation or taxation of sugar, sweetened beverages. We need to engage with these ministries also, which can influence the public health, is really important for all of us. Advocacy is also required in investing health. We as a people of this country, including government, spends 3.8% of our GDP on our health. The government of India spends 1.1% of the GDP of the government of India on our health, which is half of Sri Lanka, fourth of China, and sixth of Thailand. So what the government of India spends on our health, the government of Sri Lanka spends 2 times more in Sri Lankan population. The government of China spends 4 times more on their population, and the government of Thailand spends 6 times more on their population. And the result of which is that 68-69% is our out-of-pocket expenses. Although our policy mentions about 2.5% is the percentage of GDP that government of India wanted, but we have been hearing this talk for several years. I think we will have to lobby for this. We will have to engage with the policymakers and the corridors of power to influence and push the agenda. The government will always have their own priorities. Health will always take the back seat. We will have to continue to make our noise. We'll have to continue to sing our music, whether the audience is 5 or 5,000. We'll have to continue to push this agenda if we really wanted to. Our advocacy efforts are really lacking. We need to see that how do we position as departments and as associations or as professionals to advance that. Let me talk to you about young leadership. I briefly mentioned also about it, but wanted to reiterate that while we continue to draw inspiration and rely on wisdom of our senior colleagues, we will have to systematically, strategically, and consciously invest in our future, in the capacity building of our own young professionals. And therefore, at the association level, with the approval of the Governing Council, that we have conceptualized and designed IAPSM Young Leadership Program. The conclave is one thing, but we have started like IAPSM webinar series. We have been conducting the capacity building workshops in the very niche areas over the period of time. We have also are involved and engaged into research activities, particularly operations and implementation research, where we have involved our younger colleagues to participate into. But it's not the job only. Association means what? Association means all of us. And therefore, all our departments probably need to see that how do we position ourselves in that context. Because that will help us to prepare our own postgraduates, undergraduates for the 21st century public health challenges. But while talking that, sometimes there's a confusion among the mind of the younger generation in the context of need and demand paradox. On one hand, we say that we need people trained in public health, but on another hand, then there is a debate that where are those positions, where they will work. Let me tell you about the numbers in the context of public health professionals. Association of Schools of Public Health in United States of America recommended a benchmark of 220 public health professionals per 100,000 population. There is no global benchmark for estimating the number of public health professionals required per 100,000 population. The ASPH has recommended for United States of America as 220 per 100,000 population. Brazil has recommended 100 per 100,000 population. One of my colleagues, she had done some research in last couple of years, and Dr. Himanshu Nigandhi also here was involved into. We estimated how many public health professionals currently are there in India. Our estimates are 11 per 100,000 population. So we have 11 public health professionals in India per 100,000 population. The recommendation is 100 per 100,000 population, 220 per 100,000 population. So there is definitely a need as compared to global benchmarks are concerned. And of course there are emerging opportunities also, not only in India but outside India also. In global health, globalization, there are new jobs are emerging. I mentioned about few jobs like, for example, the big data analytics or the health economics. Niche areas in public health are being explored. Even in pharmaceutical industry, the consulting firms, they all need public health professionals. All these big consulting firms like McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group and PricewaterhouseCoopers, they are working with the NITI Aayog. And they need people trained in public health to work into. So job opportunities are considered, they are emerging. And I'm sure with the creation of public health cadre in the states, which is mandated as a part of national health policy by 2022, it happens so, there will be enough opportunities for all of us to work and engage into. To end my deliberation, I wanted to put some advice for our young graduates. You need to be focused. And there are several examples of that. The two examples sitting here. Professor Pandav is known as iodine man of this country, and why so? His contribution is such significant in iodine deficiency disorders control. Dr. Sarunke, anything happens related to disease surveillance, is being called, and I just gave an example, he is called by the Secretary, Union Health Secretary, a couple of days back. We will have to be focused, and if you continue to work in a particular area for 5 years, 10 years down the line, you become a leader in that particular area. We need champions and leaders in different areas of public health. You may work in the area of climate change, or you may work in the area of nutrition. You may work in the area of health promotion, or you may work in the area of infectious disease modeling. You should have those competencies and skills very specified. There is no dearth of role models. People are sitting here. And unless you have those competencies, people will not hire our graduates also. Somebody called me and said that he wanted to hire health economist, but he says that the person may have a PhD or may not have a PhD in health economics or MD program. But what he says is that I wanted to hire a person who will be on his own or her own, independently able to do the economic evaluation of the data that we have. So degrees and qualifications and everything is important. But are you able to do that? Do you have those competencies is important. Somebody calls me from development agency and says that, do you know somebody who can write good grant proposals? He says that, a person may be either MD or PhD or MPH, it does not matter. But a person should have those skills of writing grants. You need to create your own niche area. You should be known for something. If you are in public health for the last 5 years or 10 years, and if you are not known for a certain area, then probably something is wrong. You should be known for something. Yes, somebody, because nowadays everything is available online. You don't have to tell that I'm expert in systematic reviews, or I'm expert in health economics, or I'm expert in infectious disease modeling. People will Google you. People will find it out. People will reach to you. Recently, WHO CRO people whom we did not know, actually a specific group of individuals, they came to us and they said that, no, you people work in human resources for health, but we wanted to create an investment case for the government of India for the health workforce. So they wanted a combination of people working in the human resources for health and the health economics. So that cross-section that they wanted to, people will come to you. Infectious disease modeling, some niche areas that you work into and you create your own niche area, you will be called and you will be recognized as a leader over a period of time. There is no shortcut to the hard work that we all know, but I wanted to re-emphasize that I again wanted to say that, I don't want to reveal the age of individuals sitting here. Dr. Sarunke came at 12:30 in the night, called me today morning at 5:30 and says that, can we meet in next 10 minutes for half an hour, today morning. And we had a meeting from 6 o'clock to 6:30 over a cup of tea, discussing and designing the strategy for the current pandemic. How PHFI can contribute was the thematic area. But the point of passion that the individual can have, I don't know, sir, whether you slept or not. He called me at 5:30. I was awake, of course, but then, and they said, we'll meet you at the breakfast. You wanted, no, immediately, Abhi milna hai. I wanted to talk to you. You need that kind of a passion, even at this age, that they can demonstrate to us. We all create our own signatures. Nobody creates our own signature. We all create our own signatures. Dr. Doke is sitting here. He has created his own signature. It is not that somebody else has created his own signature. We all, over the period of time, create our own signatures. And we need to therefore realize, as individual professionals, as in our departments and as in our association, be the change you wish to see in the world, what Mahatma has told us. Don't wait for anybody. No invitation would come to us. Sometimes these sustainable development goals where deliberation is going on. Some colleagues from community medicine department in our association, Dr. Kadri was present, we are not involved. Well, who will involve you? There is no ministry of SDGs. We have to proactively position ourselves that how do I contribute? Don't wait for invitations. We have to on our own see that how we contribute to and proactively contribute. That's how we can take the public health further forward. This is what I wanted to deliberate to you on, contextualizing and catapulting community medicine discipline in the 21st century. If we do that, we will be able to create Swasth Bharat along with Swachh Bharat. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Jodhpe. And I think, friends, I do not have to spend any time on indicating one more point, or rather I don't want to stress more on a point that in a very comprehensive fashion, he has brought out challenges, he has brought out opportunities for the youngsters who are going to be who are right now engaged into the departments of community medicine and brighter future that you have. I think Sanjay, you have done a great job. I'm pretty certain that this will be an inspirational, speech and talk to them, not only to them, to us also. And thanks for reminding that we are in an age where we have to be constantly engaged to ensure that our brain and legs not start getting tired. So we are pretty certain that his address is not only speaking to the youngsters, but to everyone sitting in this audience and for entire IAPSM members as well as for the public health people, not only for the state of Maharashtra, but even at the national level. Friends, I can assure you that if you have been, and I will request you to kindly share your presentations, and I'm sure this itself will become a guiding kind of a documentation for the youngsters as well as teachers who are at present engaged to use this for multi-purpose advocacy, for planning, for the engaging youngsters or likely to join in near future, and also most important part is related to the use of technology. Friends, I can assure you that everyone at Government of India and the state governments are looking at you to give assistance, to give leadership by using technology to find solutions of public health challenges and problems in this country. So, Sanjay, you have done a great job. Congratulations. So, final word from our friend, Dr. Pandav.
Well, there are two kinds of teachers that you meet in life. Those who are mentors and those who are tormentors. We are fortunate enough to torment Dr. Sanjay Zhodpe. It's one of the best days of my life that when you see a student excelling the teacher in terms of presentation. Very analytic, very thoughtful, very futuristic, very comprehensive, very clear. I have been attending international national conferences since 1971. So that the number must be 1,000 plus, like 1,000 days. This is one of the best presentations I have seen in my life. So ladies and gentlemen, give him a standing ovation for this. Let's give a standing ovation to Sanjay. And my final line is, he came at midnight, I came at 4 in the morning, only to listen to his lesson. There was a discussion about neend, the passion. इस सफ़र में हम नींद खो गए, इस सफ़र में हम नींद खो गए, आखिर रात भी थक कर सो गई. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया.
Thank you, sir. I request our respected chairpersons to please felicitate the speaker. I request SZ Kazi sir to please come on dais. I request Professor SZ Kazi sir, Organizing Chair Director, R&D, Professor, Community Medicine, JNMC, DMI MSDU, to please felicitate the chairpersons.
There will be a special session by me at midnight today on my understanding of Dr. Sanjay Jodhpe's donation. So you all are most welcome.
Thank you, sir.